The Daily Raz Show with Jack Wilson.
Okay, we are on. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Raz Show. I'm Jack Wilson, and thanks for joining us, whether you're watching or listening. My last podcast, I said that I was going to do one on my first business. So let's go. Let's do it. I don't have any notes. I'm going to do this from memory. And this was when I was 11 years old, my first business, real business, where I actually made money at it. So just to give you how this began, I spent my summers and with my grandparents. This was in southern Ohio. At that time we were living in Akron, and I would go in the summers and spend them with at my grandparents. It was great fun. I mean, I was able to camp and fish and just everything. So when school recessed for the summer, which was usually around Memorial Day at that time, and then we went back on Labor Day. Now, I began going down there when I was, I think, about 10 years old, and I continued for like 4 or 5 years until I discovered girls at like 14 or 15, and then I stayed at home with my buddies. My buddies always wondered why. My friends in Akron always wondered why I would go down there in the summer. Well, you're probably going to hear some of the reasons that I did versus living in a city. And when I went to my grandparents, again, I could go fishing, I could go camping, swimming, and at this particular summer, at 11 years old, I learned my grandfather taught me to drive. I actually drove his car out on the highways. And we started, of course, I'll tell you how we started later on. But let's get to my first business. So in going there, I had a cousin at the time. He has since passed away, but my cousin at the time was my age, within a couple of months. And he would go there and stay with his grandparents and our grandparents. His grandparents lived just a few miles away. So for a while, we were actually together. This one particular summer, trying to find something to do, I guess, my grandfather came up with this idea of making charcoal. Now, who would ever think of making charcoal? The fact is that my family, that side of the family, my grandfather's brother, which would be my great uncle, had a charcoal business. He had charcoal kilns in Ohio, and he also had them in Florida, or southern Georgia, but I think northern Florida. But he produced charcoal and also made charcoal briquettes for cooking and grills. So, my grandfather came up with this idea. We had no idea. Of course, we knew what the charcoal plant was because we'd been there, but we had no idea about charcoal. So my grandfather came up with this idea to make charcoal. And, of course, Mike and I said, wow, yeah, of course. Well, this project turned into like 2 or 3 weeks, at least 2 weeks, as I recall. And my grandfather's property was pretty large. So it had a large field of grass and sod, which we were going to need, as I'll explain. So we went down in one of the into the bottom, away from the house, and gathered up all of the wood that we could. I'm talking lumber, anything that was dry, of course. Lumber, wood. We went out to the woods, and there were a lot of woods, and gathered up wood and of any substantial size. And we built 2 charcoal kilns. You can, for those of you who don't know what it is, I don't have any pictures of them to present here on the video, but you can see them online. They look like a big beehive if you were making them on your own. Now, my great uncle's charcoal kilns were large, and they had doorways that you could go through with at that time with forklifts and take wood in and stack it. They would take the wood in and stack it, and pretty much the same process that I'm going to describe to you here on how charcoal was made. So we stacked this wood in like you were making a teepee. Straight up and down, and then, of course, it ended up being like a teepee. It was about 6 or maybe 6 feet high, 7 feet high, and maybe 8 feet in diameter. Each one of these kilns, that would be K-I-L-N, kiln, and the wood was stacked in it against it, like you picture a teepee. And we put everything in there. Well, that took a number of days to do, probably a week to build these. And we built 2 of them. And again, they were about 6 feet high and about 8 feet in diameter. So it was a lot of wood in there. And then we went out, and this is all at the direction of our grandfather, because he had done this. He actually helped build the large kilns that my great uncle owned. But we we went out into the grass area, and we cut out sod, and took the sod and stacked it in against the wood. So it basically, we're talking sod that was maybe 4 or 6 inches deep, and of course it was grass. And we stacked it in, or rather on top of the wood, all the way up from the ground all the way up to the top, and left a hole at the top, just like you would in a teepee, if you were thinking of that. We left a hole in the top of about a foot diameter. And at the bottom, we filled it all in, all the way around, both of these kilns, which look like just big giant beehives. And then at the bottom, I remember we filled that in, and at the top we had the hole in it. And then at the bottom, we cut out vents of about 8 inches out of the bottom, and kind of like a half moon, or kind of like a half circle. And I think we had like five of those around it, 5 or 6, no more than that, around the circumference of the kiln. So now you have the hole in the top and the vents on the bottom. And then we went, by this time it took at least a week to build these, my cousin and I. And my grandfather didn't do anything other than give us direction on how to do this. So we built these, and then when we finally finished building them, we took paper and whatever we could get to burn, I guess, and put it inside, pushed it into the middle of the wood piles on both of these. and we lit both of them, started them on fire. And of course, the smoke is coming out the top, and and the air is going in the bottom, so it's got great ventilation, and the smoke is pouring out the top because the wood is on fire. Well, we don't want the wood to burn up. That's not making charcoal. So what we did was after the fire started, and it was a good ignition, and they were. We went around each one of the holes and started the fire in each one, so we know that the wood's burning evenly around. And once we know the fire is started, we went and we plugged off all of these vents, and also plugged off the top. So now we've plugged everything up, and the fire is burning inside. But we don't want a flame. We don't want the flame. We want heat, but no flame. So when we did that, that was it. That was pretty much it, as my memory recalls. I don't think of anything that we did other than that, other than to make sure we just kind of watched it to make sure that nothing collapsed. If there was a hole that would develop from from a collapse or something, we would, and I think we also did wet down the sod that we put on it, but not too much. I'm kind of going from memory on this. But once it was burning, or was hot, let's call it burning, that was it. That was it. And we just watched it for a number of days. It could have taken a week. It could have been 4 days. I don't recall, but it was at least several days. And finally, if my memory serves me right, it finally, normally those would collapse because the wood collapsed. But I think you finally knock it down. I believe we finally knocked it down, the dirt. And of course, then we had to go through and pick out the dirt and pick out the charcoal. Now the charcoal is not like charcoal briquettes. This is where I'm going with this. We're 11 years old, but this is how it's done fundamentally. And we had to pick out, once it cooled down, which it was days, it could have been a week. Once it cooled down, we went in and picked out the charcoal pieces. Now, remember, the wood, it did not burn up. It just turns the wood to carbon. And we picked out the pieces of wood, large and small, and set them aside. I think we had at that time, something set aside on the ground to put it on. And that took a long time. Of course, the tiny pieces, the pieces that were size of, small pieces like your fingers and that, we didn't want. We wanted it to be at least, the size of the palm of your hand. And we picked all of those pieces out, which took days to finally clean it all out. And then what? What do we do with it? Well, my grandfather knew a lot of people. And the town, the major town from where the house was, he knew all of the people up in there. And it kind of like out of the movies. And it had a main street, and supermarkets were not really popular then. I think the town had one supermarket. But it did have a number of stores on streets, and there was one on a street. I don't remember the name of it. It's not important. It's not there now. But it was one of those stores like you see in the movie, and my grandfather knew him. And apparently, we find out these things later on, but he came to us and said, "Boys, I got your charcoal sold, but so we need to bag it up, bag it up, and we'll take it up and sell it to whoever this. I think his name was Henry's or something. We'll sell it to him. He's going to buy it. And it was like, we had no idea. It was like, wow, okay. We didn't even ask how much. But then it was like, well, what are we going to put it in? What kind of bags? Well, that's where my great uncle comes in. My grandfather went to him and got, I believe it were 25-pound charcoal bags that my great uncle had for his business. I think he had 25-pound, 50-pound bags. And brought those to us. Of course, they had the wire ties. And my grandfather crossed the name out of my great uncle's charcoal company and wrote our name in. I don't remember what it was, Phil and Mike's or Jack and Jim's or I don't know. He wrote something in there that was our name. And we used those to bag up the charcoal. We had to bag every one up. There was a lot of bags. And to tell you how many, my grandfather had a two-wheel trailer that he used to pull behind his car when he was doing contracting work and going to construction sites. He would put a lot of things in this trailer. Well, anyway, we bagged all of this charcoal up, loaded up the trailer with these bags of charcoal, and took them up to the major town that I was telling you about, and unloaded them. And they kind of, at that time they put things out on the sidewalk and sold, vegetables and things out on the sidewalk. So we kind of unloaded these out on the sidewalk in the front of the store. And that was it, We went home, and I believe my grandfather gave us $50, something like that. And that was a long time ago. And first of all, $25 for two 11-year-old kids apiece in the summer for just having fun was a lot of money. I mean, $25 lasts the whole summer. Are you kidding? And so I think it was $50. It could have been a little more, but that seems good. I can't imagine it being any more than that because how much did they sell a bag of charcoal for? So it couldn't have been much more than that. But anyway, we made $50 on making charcoal. Now, little did I know till later on, then I heard the story from our family and my grandfather that this charcoal was really bad. You can't just make charcoal. It will work, but it requires some effort to burn if you're going to use it in your grill, okay? Because in charcoal briquettes, they first of all, they crush the charcoal to a powder. Then they put some other binders in it and some other additives to help it burn. Well, those were just plain charcoal and chunks of wood, And as I heard, people bought bags of it because it was kind of like a good thing. This guy was doing this for my grandfather, for his benefit. And it's almost like a charity case, I think. Anyway, the quality of the charcoal was pretty poor. I don't think anybody really had any success with it except us. We knew how to make charcoal, and we knew the processes of business. And it was a first experience that when you're going to do a business, it requires work. It requires a lot of work, and that was. We learned a lot. It was fun. We made money at it. I think my grandfather had as much fun with it, watching us do it, as we were doing it. And it was kind of a family business because, again, my great uncle owned charcoal companies, charcoal businesses. So it was kind of an offshoot, and I think everybody had a lot of fun with that later on, talking about it and passing on the stories and about us making this charcoal. And so that's the story. Now, while I was there, I think I mentioned that's when I learned to drive. I would go down, and my grandfather, he would allow me to pull the car in the garage, back it out of the garage. So it got to the point I was using his car, and my uncle had a car that he left there and would use whenever he came in on weekends and that. But there was enough property that I could back these cars in and out and, move them, turn them, pull them around. And I got pretty good at it, at 11 years old, driving the cars around the property, backing them up, pulling them in. And, I would pull in the garage, back out of the garage, drive around the property, bring it back. So I got pretty good at it. And then my grandfather, one day we were out somewhere in the country, in the side roads, and he pulled over and he said, "You drive." So I got over, and I could hardly see over the steering wheel. I think I had to get something to sit on. But I began driving. And, out on the real roads, I can tell you 20 miles an hour felt like I was going 60. And especially when cars were coming at me for the first time. But, I got to the point where I was able to drive around town. These are small towns. Drive around town. I was driving all the time. And I got really good at it. And so every summer when I would go down from 11 years old to 12, 13, I would always go driving with my grandfather. We would go fishing or go here or go there. Generally, I drove. And so I got pretty good at it. Became very comfortable at it. And there was one time that we were coming back after my stay in the summer, and my parents came down, and at that time my father had he had a big Oldsmobile. I think it was a 98, and we were coming back on Interstate 71, and he let me drive, and my mother moved in the back seat, and my father was in the passenger seat as I was driving, and my mother was like, I know she was just totally freaking out, because here I am on the interstate driving 70 miles an hour. And, at that time I didn't have a driver's license. I think I was like 15, 14. So that was my experience driving. My grandfather taught me to do a lot. He taught me how to fly fish. He taught me camping. I just did a lot of things when I went to stay with my grandparents in the summer. And I did have buddy friends down there too. As I got a little older, I did have guy friends, and we would go in the woods, scouting around, and like I say, fishing, and so it was a great fun in the summer. But that's my story on my first business that I actually made money at. People do a lot of things, but this one was actually cash, folding money. And I think the next one I'm going to do, because a while back on these podcasts, I had said that I was going to talk about some of my businesses that I've done. I think the next one, I was just talking to my brother the other day, and I think the next one I will talk about is the business that my brother and I did a number of years ago, and I hope he agrees with me on this. It was a retreading business, and people are probably like, Well, we got the charcoal business. Now you're talking about retreading. A lot of people don't even know what retreading is. But my family, our family business background was in the tire and automotive business, and retreading was part of it. And my father was he was big in equipment, retreading equipment. At that time, it was hugely popular. Now the popularity is basically for retreading only used for commercial aviation tires, and truck tires. We can talk about that. But ours that we started was passenger tires. Now, back when we did this, passenger tire retreading in the Northeast and the northeastern states was very popular because of snow. Before they had radials, all-season radials, snow tires were very popular. And retreading of snow tires, retreaded snow tires were very popular. So that's what my brother and I decided to do, was open a retreading business to retread tires for other tire dealers. In other words, other tire dealers, we retreaded their tires for them, or we retreaded tires and sold them to them. Our retail business was at that time very small in retreading. Most of it was what would be called custom retreading. So I think it would really be interesting and fun to talk about that, since we're talking about starting businesses. I've done several, and none of them are easy. They all require work, and you've heard the work that went into making charcoal, and now you're going to hear the work that went into making retreads. There's always work involved whenever you start off on an enterprise. Anyway, that was fun. I hope it was interesting. It was for me. I kind of even forgotten about it, but glad you could join us and listen and watch. You can follow me, Jack Wilson, on the dailyraz.com. That's the website that I use to write articles on. I also post all of the audio and video podcasts on dailyraz.com. You can get the podcasts on Apple and anything that has an RSS feed. It's out there. And then we also show the video podcasts on YouTube at Daily Raz Show on YouTube. So follow us. We'll continue to do this. We'll probably do the show on retreading maybe tomorrow. And I'm also going to get back to doing some of the political things on Donald Trump and what's going on in Washington, because we are coming up on elections. Everyone knows my feelings on it. It's no secret. And I do want to go back and cover what's going on and remind everyone that it's so important to get out and vote this time. It's very important. So thanks for joining us. It's been fun. Glad you could make it, and come back again, and we'll have another show for you. I'm Jack Wilson. This is the Daily Raz Show. Thanks.